I was watching CNN yesterday, and they spent 10 minutes talking about the fact that Vladimir Zelensky didn't wear a suit. And that was something that happened. That
Suitcase
was something that happened days ago. I mean, seriously,
in the city that gave us Woodward and Bernstein. This is all about Woodbine and beer stain, don't you think?
it's pathetic. It really is. And
Yeah. You know what I wonder? Uh, when he turns up next time at the White House, will he be in a tracksuit? When Keir Starmer turns up,
Keir Starmer should turn up in a tracksuit. That would be great.
yeah, Arsenal strip.
What would Donald Trump look like in a tracksuit? Wow.
Oof, I
Anyway, he was very pleased that Elon Musk dressed up for the speech on Congress. Elon was in a suit.
still looks like a teenager trapped in an adult's body, don't you think?
I couldn't possibly comment. I'm Mark Stone,
And I'm James Matthews.
and you're listening to day 46 of Trump 100. The US shifts further away from Ukraine, this time pausing intelligence sharing. We'll discuss all the repercussions.
It's not just Ukraine in the headlines. The White House has announced it's been speaking directly to Hamas. There is also the US-Canada trade war, ongoing developments on that. That's all to come. So let's get started.
Let's begin with Ukraine. Yesterday evening, we were both just absorbing President Trump's address to Congress, where he announced a letter had been received by President Zelensky. It sounded like there was a rapprochement. He was forgiving Zelensky. And now we hear today that that might be the case, but also we hear that intelligence sharing has been stopped between the United States and Ukraine, and that the United States is stopping its partners from doing that as well. So the UK is now unable to share intelligence with Ukraine. It's quite something.
It is extremely serious for Ukraine because we have had the pausing in shipments of weapons. They were on their way, and that was stalled. That's a worry for Kyiv because in time that could mean their weapon supply dries up. But this business of intelligence sharing, Ukraine doesn't have its own satellites or spy planes in the air. It relies on the Americans to let them know where there might be Russian targets, but also it relies on the Americans to tip them off about incoming fire, Russian missiles, Russian drones heading towards Ukraine, civilian areas,
Yeah.
who knows where. That has been put on pause, and that is a clear, present, and immediate danger for Kyiv. Let's have a listen to Mike Walls, the U.S. National Security Advisor, who addressed matters Ukraine today at the White House.
We have taken a step back and are pausing and reviewing all aspects of this relationship. But I just got off the phone before I walked out here with my counterpart, the Ukrainian National Security Advisor. We are having good talks on a location for the next round of negotiations, on delegations, on substance.
Yeah, so Mike Walls there suggesting that they are now as far as talking about talks for a location where they can regroup, where the Oval Office meeting can be reformed with perhaps a slightly different outcome. You talked about intelligence sharing. Do you know who else has a massive stake in controlling what goes on in Ukraine?
His first name is not Elon, is it?
Yeah, he is. It is indeed Starlink. This
Yeah.
system of satellites that whiz around our planet. It is through Starlink devices that the Ukrainian military relies on. Its ability to see where Russian artillery are, where Russian positions are. Elon Musk could, and in fact has threatened in the past, to turn off Starlink over Ukraine. So the leverage is huge.
Yeah, it's all about pressure, isn't it, from Donald Trump, a man with his foot firmly on the throat of the Ukrainians. And of course, yeah, it's a business deal. Yeah, it's pressure. It's also human lives. For every passing hour, for every passing day when Ukraine doesn't have this lifeline, intelligence, military weapons, and so on, lives are being lost, civilian lives. He is weakening Ukraine in the fight against Russia. And that feeds into this notion that he's on the side of Putin rather more than he's on the side of Zelensky.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted a simple analogy, it is like putting a blindfold over the eyes of all the soldiers on the front line as Russia is attacking them. That is what they're doing. It means that the Russians are able to fire into Ukraine, and the Ukrainians won't be able to see what is coming necessarily. That is how immediate the impact is, which is why it is such a tight noose that Trump is now putting around Zelensky's neck. It's extraordinary stuff.
And into this discussion comes John Healey, the UK Defence Secretary. He's in Washington, going to meet with his US counterpart, Pete Hegseth, Mark, yeah?
Yeah, John Healey and Pete Hegseth, two such starkly different characters. They just are very different people, and yet they've met before, and they will be meeting again in Washington. You've got Pete Hegseth, the self-styled action man, sort of muscular, beefed up, right, walking around the Pentagon, firing all these woke generals that he doesn't like. And against that, you've got the classic Labour Party politician from Yorkshire, from South Yorkshire, a man, John Healey, who has had defence in his blood for a long time. He was Shadow Defence Secretary for so long, really well respected within the military. And so these very different guys, different politics as well, starkly different politics, getting together, having to lock horns and get on. And try and work out what's going on in the White House. Certainly, that's John Healey's job.
Yeah, it's Top Gun meets Dad's Army, isn't it? Anyway.
I love how I always come up with that, and then you just sum it up with a classic. Very, very good, James.
Cheers. But listen, French President Emmanuel Macron, he has addressed his nation today, saying that Europe must be prepared to go it alone in defending Ukraine without further assistance from the United States. I want to believe, he said, that the US will stand by our side, but we have to be ready for that not to be the case. A lot's happened, Mark, since the Dear Donald, Cher Donald meeting in the Oval Office. Macron has said his country may have to consider boots on the ground in Ukraine. So the noises from Paris and London, they acknowledge a reality staring them in the face.
Macron's closing words: our generation will no longer collect the peace dividend. It depends on us whether our children will be able to collect tomorrow the dividends of our commitments. Quite powerful stuff, I think.
And Mark, from one theatre of war to another, the White House, via its press secretary Caroline Leavitt, it's confirmed that the Trump administration has been holding direct talks with Hamas over the release of US hostages held in Gaza. There's also reporting that they've been discussing a broader deal to end the war. Unprecedented. Yeah, the US has never engaged directly with Hamas, a terrorist organization. And on top of that, Donald Trump, he's met with freed hostages today.
The Trump administration surprises again. We did not expect that they would hold direct talks with Hamas. Here's what we know. The talks took place in Doha. Doha is, of course, where Hamas has a presence, a political presence, and it is from Doha through the Qataris that much of the mediation has been done. But it's always been done with the Americans and the Israelis in one room of a hotel, literally, and Hamas and the Egyptians and the Qataris in another room. They've never talked directly. So this is really interesting, the idea that the Americans and Hamas in the same room. The talks were carried out on the American side by Adam Boehler. He is Trump's presidential envoy for hostage affairs. Did Israel know that these talks were taking place? Our understanding is they didn't know up until the point that it was announced. Reminder, there are 59 hostages still thought to be held in Gaza. The IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, says 35 of those are dead, 22 still alive, and among them 5 Americans. And actually, in the last few minutes as we record, adding a bit of context to this, Donald Trump has just posted on social media what looks to me to be two things: a warning to Hamas, a final warning, but also quite a neat shift away from the focus that has been elsewhere on Ukraine and stuff. He's now doing what we've seen him do before, which is pull focus back to a different subject. He says, Shalom Hamas means hello and goodbye. You can choose. Release all the hostages now, not later, and immediately return all of the dead bodies of the people you murdered, or it is over for you. Well, the Israelis might say it should already be over for them. But anyway, he then says, only sick and twisted people keep bodies, and you are sick and twisted. I am sending Israel everything it needs to finish the job. Not a single Hamas member will be safe if you don't do as I say. I have just met with your former hostages whose lives you have destroyed. This is your last warning, so says Donald Trump. For the leadership, now is the time to leave Gaza while you still have a chance. And also to the people of Gaza, a beautiful future awaits, he says, but not if you hold hostages. If you do, you are dead. Make a smart decision. Release the hostages now, or they will be hell to pay later. Donald Trump's language, the way he's framing it, is classic Trump. But it seems to me like he's kind of issuing a last warning.
Yeah, I think the Israelis will be comforted by that Truth Social post. I think clearly they would have been concerned. They sounded concerned that direct contact between the United States and Hamas. I think there will be Israeli concern about contact with their enemy, an enemy they've been trying to eliminate from the face of the planet. And they will have a lack of control around these talks, of which they are no part. A deal being done that's by the nature of a deal, certainly a Donald Trump deal, Hamas will be hoping to get something, a quid pro quo. And, that dialogue between Israel's enemy, their great enemy, and their great ally, that will cause them anxiety. I think for Israel and for Palestinians and neighboring Arab countries, the concern will be that what's right for the American people isn't necessarily what's right for them. And, they're already concerned at Donald Trump's public statements, his vision for Gaza and its population, a future in Trump's eyes, which is laced with Trump's self-interest, taking that same vested interest into talks with a terrorist organization, Hamas. It's fraught with difficulty and unpredictability.
I mean, who'd have thought, Trump talking to the Russians, Trump talking to Hamas, pearl clutching going on around the Western world at all this? Is he just doing it for his own self-interest, or is it pragmatic diplomacy? If you want to bring an end to all this, you've got to talk to both sides. That is certainly the way Team Trump are framing this.
We'll see if it yields results.
Let's move on to tariffs, because we've got to rattle through this briefly, but it's so important and seems pretty awkward phone call between Trump and Trudeau today.
Yeah, it seems there might be a partial breakthrough. There was a call between Donald Trump and Trudeau. In terms of the hard news, there are reports that Trump has decided to delay for a month some of the tariffs on Mexico and Canada, tariffs relating to vehicle manufacturers. That was an industry very much due to feel the burn from these tariffs. But interestingly, on Truth Social, after the call with Trudeau, Trump spoke about how Trudeau had been telling him that things were getting better in terms of the flow of fentanyl over the Canadian border. Trump said he told him that's not good enough. And he also wrote that Trudeau couldn't tell him when the Canadian elections were, which made me curious, he said, like, what's going on here? And that's Trump saying that. I then realized he's trying to use this issue to stay in power. Good luck, Justin. Now, Mark, quite the detective work from Donald Trump, but here's the spoiler for you, President Trump. Trudeau's actually stepping down. He's got 3 days left in office. He's resigning. He's being replaced. So he's out of the picture.
I've spoken to Canadians here in Washington over the past week or so who are increasingly baffled by all of this. Alarmed, yes, worried, but baffled too. And they just don't know what they can do. I mean, it is a fact that there is literally hardly any fentanyl coming over from Canada into the United States. It's just not happening. And yet Trump is claiming, one of these sort of lies he keeps saying, it doesn't matter if it's not true, just keep repeating it. But in this case, he's doing it. And then the consequence is these tariffs. And the Canadians just don't know what to do except for reciprocate with their own tariffs. But the late news, though, today is that Trump seems to have exempted some car manufacturers from these tariffs as a consequence of a call from the top 3 car manufacturers in the United States. They clearly worried as well because, as Ed Conway has been reporting for us, car parts move back and forth 4 or 5 times over the border between Canada and Mexico before they finally look like a car. And so every movement requires tariffs. I mean, it's a disaster for domestic car manufacturing. That's why they called Trump. He took the call. They said, don't do this. He said, fine, you've got a month just on cars, which is great for Canada, great for America, great for the manufacturers. But what happens after a month?
Yeah, and of course, these tariffs, they could steer the economies in Canada and Mexico towards recession. So economically, it's hugely serious. But just in terms of the relationship, that interconnection between Canada and the United States. Anytime you turn on the TV and watch people speaking on the matter, it's like, especially from Canada, the face, the expression, something really bad is happening. In Canada's Globe and Mail newspaper, they put it this way: the United States is now a protection racket, providing security only to countries that give it something in return. We'll see. A huge damage being caused to the Canadian-US relationship.
Yeah, with all this news, James, with all this infighting, China have been a bit quiet until last night.
There was a time when this would have been the headline of the day, Mark. They, in response to the tariffs, the Chinese embassy, it posted this on social media on X. If a war is what the US wants, be it a tariff war, a trade war, or any other type of war, we're ready to fight until the end. Can you imagine that 5 years ago? That would have been huge. People would have been hiding underneath the kitchen table. But now, China talking about fighting to the end. It's kind of, not now, China. We've got enough on our plate. What is it? World War III? Yeah. Get in the queue. You'll find Vladimir Putin already waiting. Although he's online, he's been there a while. He's got a mobile order in.
Look, one thing I think we should watch over the next few days, back to domestic affairs and Doge and the focus of Elon Musk on slimming down government. Reporting coming out as we go to record this. What is it? 6 o'clock-ish in Washington. The Department of Veteran Affairs is planning to reduce its workforce by more than 80,000 people, according to the New York Times, as part of the cuts put in place by Elon Musk. This is huge. Department of Veteran Affairs provides healthcare and other services to Americans, many veterans.
Yeah.
80,000 workers cut potentially. So let's watch that.
Yeah, you offend the country's heroes, you offend the country in a place where, people who've been to war, members of the military, as you know, Mark, are revered. You go to a baseball match, you have to stand up in their honor. It's that's big.
Yeah, definitely. Anyway, that's all we've got time for episode 46 of Trump 100. Please do send us your questions for our Q&A episode. We've had lots this week, so we're looking forward to getting into them.
And do remember to follow us on your podcast app so that you never miss an episode. Still more than 50 to go, so make sure you're signed up to all that is still to come. Bye for now.
Cheerio.